Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight, we're going to have the honor and privilege of speaking with Zach Banner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Being from Cleveland, I am painfully aware of the great football tradition of the Pittsburgh Steelers and not such fond memories of the Steel Curtain and Mean Joe Green. But tonight's an example of the ways in which this storied football organization has distinguished itself beyond the gridiron. And Zach Banner is a leader and a wonderful representative of that organization, which has distinguished itself in so many different ways during this difficult period in Pittsburgh. A little bit about Zach. He was born in Tacoma, Washington. Mom and dad, both educators. Mom's a teacher. Dad's a middle school principal, and father has served as a superintendent. So education is part of the family virtue and value system. Zach attended USC, both as a basketball player and a football player, and he made the All-American team twice, two-time All-American. And notably, he was a member of the fraternity of ZBT. He joined the fraternity because he was told that it was a multicultural fraternity. So much for truth in advertising. But the relationships that Zach created in that setting had a powerful impact on his life and also gave him insights to which he responded over the summer. So let's go back to the summer of 2020. I don't need to rehearse it with you. The murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, tensions were high. And across the country, there were marches and tension simmering, people expressing their anger and their pain, saying enough is enough. On July 7th of 2020, there was the following quotation. Oh, I can't do this right, so I'm just going to read it to you. So forgive me. And this was from Deshaun Jackson of the Philadelphia Eagles, who has about 1.4 million followers on Instagram. And in the screenshot, there was a quote widely attributed to Adolf Hitler that said, "The Jews will extort America. Their plan for world domination won't work if the Negroes know who they are." And he goes on to say, "Because the white Jews know that the Negroes are the real children of Israel, and to keep America secret, the Jews will blackmail America. They'll extort America. Their plan for world domination won't work if the Negroes know who they were. The white citizens of America will be terrified to know that all this time they've been mistreated and discriminating and lynching the children of Israel." 2 days later, Zach Banner posted this video on Twitter.
It's a beautiful morning this morning, but I'm just going to be honest, I haven't been able to sleep in the last couple hours because I woke up this morning to the news about the Deshaun Jackson and his incident with the Jewish community, and I saw his apology video, and it seems like his heart's in the right place. So understand that this video isn't even towards him, it's towards that idea and mindset that sparked it in the first place. There's a common misbelief amongst black and brown people, and I know this from growing up, and I've heard it and I've listened to it, that Jewish people are just like any other white race, you know, like it's just you mix them up with the rest of the majority, and you don't understand that they're a minority as well. I didn't know this until I went to USC, and I had friends who are now family members, believe it or not, who are part of the Jewish community, current students and alumni. And also, I was here on the team, my first year with the team, a couple years ago during the, it's just tough, man, during that synagogue shooting in this beautiful city of Pittsburgh. And we need to understand that Jewish people deal with the same amount of hate and similar hardships and hard times. And I'm not trying to get emotional right now, but I want to preach to the Black and brown community that we need to uplift them and put our arms around them just as much. When we talk about the Black Lives Matter and we talk about elevating ourselves, we can't do that while stepping on the back of other people to elevate ourselves. And that's very, very important to me. And that should be important to everyone. We can't preach equality, but in the result, we're just trying to flip the script and change the hierarchy, if that makes sense. Change your heart, put your arm around people, and let's all uplift each other. Have a great day.
Welcome, Zach Banner.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi. Thank you.
It's great to be with you. We're really honored to spend time with you. And let me just begin by thanking you for being the kind of leader that stands up, speaks his mind, and makes a difference. And we all know that your video made a significant difference. So thank you for that. It was honest, it was powerful. But I got to ask you, what was going through your mind when you stood up on the roof of your building and took that video? What were you thinking? And why was it important to make the video?
I just think because, especially as an organization and as a league, the NFL, when one of us does something outrageous, something that's hurtful, we have a very vast, diverse audience and fans. Our fans are worldwide, different colors, different races, different cultures. When we offend when one of our workers or one of our players does something to offend a group of people, I think it's up to us to also publicly not only denote that and take that down and say, hey, that's not us, but to also heal and to also put our arms around those who have been affected, especially when it affects somebody who's been recently hurt. And the Pittsburgh community in the 412 was drastically devastated. It was bad a couple of years ago during the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting. And it was just unnecessary and it was very hurtful.
It seemed when you were speaking on the video that when you got to the Tree of Life section, when you started talking about that, it felt like you were becoming emotional. What was going through your mind when you're thinking about that?
No, what was going through my mind was a flashback at the hotel, because I was at the shooting happened on a Saturday morning, and usually, obviously, we play on Sundays, and we go to the team hotel, Saturday evening, and we had a home game the next day. And I just remember getting to the hotel, people are quiet because, it was all over the news. The shooting was all over the news, and you had helicopters and all those things going around Pittsburgh. And it was just very, very chaotic. Shady Sides, Squirrel Hills, 10 minutes that way. So when something that vast happens, like, FBI, SWAT teams are all over the city. It was very, very sad news coverage. So I just remember how quiet the room was, man, and how different it felt. Usually you have a bunch of prideful grown men walking in, joking around, trying to enjoy those, the brotherhood, enjoy the night before, just chill, eat some good food, watch some film. But some people weren't even eating just because there was just a bad taste in the air. We had no Jewish players on our team, but National Football League is 80% plus black or brown. That same feeling when I heard that gut wrenching feeling is the same feeling I felt when I was in second or third grade and I read about the bombing of the church in Birmingham, Alabama,
Mhm.
when the Ku Klux Klan had purposely bombed a church because it was a black church and 4 little girls had been killed in that bomb.
Mhm.
Those girls were my age. It's that feeling that, like, it's called empathy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean, Rabbi? That's all it is. Sometimes we're empathetic towards ourselves, and unfortunately, that's usually how the world works. And we force ourselves to put barriers and walls around us to try to protect us, and we really hold in a lot of hate and a lot of anger. It's the same feeling I felt when I learned about my mother's home island, the island of Guam, a U.S. territory, was taken over by the Japanese 2 years into the World War II. My grandfather was a prisoner of war, and his mother didn't even make it out of that.
Mhm.
Hate is hate. I'm not Jewish. I have no idea what that amazing, beautiful art piece behind you has to do with. You know what I'm saying? But it's that belongs to you. And there's people who want to smash that and break that with rocks and tear that down. And that's just as hurtful as the same people who not only want to tear down Jews, but they want to put blacks and browns on crosses.
Uh, Thank you for that. Very
You know what I mean? I don't mean
I
to make
know
this a
exactly what you
depressing thing, but that you asked me about that feeling, and that's that gut wrenching feeling I get every time we talk about stuff like this, hate crimes.
it's so sad that we've become so tribal that it's only about my pain and the people who look like me. And what you've talked about is the empathy that transcends. And you talked about the church bombing in Birmingham. You talked about what your family went through in Guam. And we talk about what happened in Pittsburgh. And I think you said it so well. Hate is hate. And you've said on other occasions, and I think it's important to respect that not only do we now want to focus on Deshaun Jackson, but we also want to acknowledge that after those statements, Deshaun Jackson has made a real effort to engage with the Jewish community and learn a bit more about the history of the Jewish people. But it's also important to acknowledge that the rhetoric that he was espousing isn't new. It comes largely from the Nation of Islam,
Absolutely.
and who has praised Hitler on many occasions and regularly portrays Jews as slave owners and oppressors of people of color. And I wonder, how deep do you think that narrative runs in the Black community? Because the fact is that the Nation of Islam does a lot of really good things for the Black community. And there's the messaging coming from this organization that's doing good. And I'm wondering, from your experience, how deep does that run?
Just to express the relevance and understanding of Black community, being from East Tacoma is just like being from Southside Chicago. Heavy Black, brown community that has had its ups and downs. In terms of the city Chicago, Fred Hampton, the Black Panther Party, had influences of the Nation of Islam. Fred Hampton is an amazing patriot warrior that some of us idolized. Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X. You want to take it to the West Coast where I'm from, Ice Cube, Lynch Mob, NWA, a lot of different things and a lot of different peoples and a lot of different times. Our idols and some of the people that we look up to in the Black community have had these influences because during those times of oppression, this is very, very similar to other times of oppression when there's an oppressed group and such a large religious, cultural figure steps in and hands you a Bible, or goes to the Pacific Islands and hands you the Book of Mormon. It's things like this those influences sometimes type in a security into your hardware, and you just feel like you have to remember those walls that I told you about putting up. The black community during a lot of the times in marching with MLK and Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown and all these other influences. Sometimes the Nation of Islam, including Louis Farrakhan, those type of influences. First of all, you should never quote Hitler. Like that's hateful in itself. You can study, his actions and study certain things that happen. And that's something too, that's the lack of understanding in the Black and brown community of the Jewish community is a reflection of the level of education that happens in the inner cities. Like in terms of Jews, in my early education, before I got to USC, and even when I got to USC, the only really interaction that I had was when I heard one of my brothers get called a kike by somebody else. And he was pissed. He was ready to fight. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And they taught me that, and our level of education in terms of the Jewish community is very minimal. It goes down to probably reading about Anne Frank and the Holocaust for a couple chapters, and they're done. So when you have such a large group who has an influence, right? I have no relation and no association with the Nation of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I remember growing up, there would be young Muslim men walking around handing out bean pies and things like that, putting their arms around the Black community, saying we need to uplift and we need to, there's a revolution. But sometimes we need to understand that revolution is counteractive when we step on others' backs. And it also took time, right? Like we have a lot more internet sources. We have a lot more social media platforms. Anti-Semitism is not taught to us in the Black community because it's not a thing. It's just not, we didn't understand what it was, anti-Semitic. I just didn't understand. I'd never even heard that term before last year in these interactions. And that's not because of my level of education. It's just a term that was never introduced to us.
It's just not a concept that we're familiar with. Exactly.
And hate is hate. Like, and we think about like some of the like horrible things, like, that Jewish people get made fun of, the noses, the hair, things like that. That just was corny to me growing up. I never heard that stuff. And if it was around me, it was like, what are you doing? It's dumb, but that's just me. And some people allow that to happen and we can't. So if you go back to asking me about Deshaun and his actions, because I don't want to make it about him, because like you said, he's taken it his own to educate himself and change his heart. That's what I said in that video. There's some dumb people out there that have a huge following. And you named I understood you cited how many followers he has because you wanted to make a point. When we say these little things, it has a ripple effect. And it's just like dropping a rock in a pond. It just spreads. You can't do that.
But you also appreciate the power of your position.
Yes.
What it means to be an NFL player. Around the nation, but especially in the Black community, right? This is this is kind of the Mount Olympus in many ways. You've made it, and you take that position seriously. I wonder, after you posted your message, did you receive any backlash? What was the reaction of the other players?
Absolutely.
Were they supportive, critical, uninterested?
Not so much for. I'm not gonna say that because. So maybe some of the players felt that, but they never told me that. But I had a lot of support from other players, Black, brown, Jewish. We don't have that many Jews in the league. We have Edelman, we have the Schwartz bros, the Kelseys. Outside of that, not too many. So they're not as represented. So when they were going through that, not too many guys wanted to speak up, and they didn't want to slow down the Black Lives Matter and slow down speaking out about George Floyd. They didn't want to take away the spotlight. And that's also because of some underlying issues, But I'm going to be honest, the biggest backlash, not backlash, but just kind of the people turning their backs on me is back home. I'm from the West Coast. I'm from where Bloods and Crips were created to protect the Black and brown communities in the inner cities. And a lot of those, when they're dealing with the Watts riots, right? And you're dealing with the beating of Rodney King. You guys have to realize that people like me aren't taught the difference between a white Jewish person and a white person.
They're both the same.
They're both the same sometimes, and I'm not saying that's right. You get what I'm
No,
saying?
no, I get it.
It's somewhat of a culture. Like, some of us don't understand the difference. We just see the fair skin, and until you have a yarmulke on or something, it's just, when you take that off, you yourself, Rabbi, you have the opportunity to I remember speaking to the rabbi over here at the Tree of Life Synagogue. He was the one that told me. He said, Zach, when I take my yarmulke off, I choose not to, because I want to show pride into who I am and my culture and religion, but I have the chance to blend in and
That's
fall
right.
back on that, and that's scary to some people.
I've used this example on other occasions, but there's in Chicago, there's a road, Lakeshore Drive, and it's very easy to get speeding tickets on Lakeshore Drive. But when if I get a speeding ticket, I'm worried about my insurance. I'm not worried about the policeman taking me out of the car or being shot as a result, right? It's a very different experience, and I think we have to be sensitive. But you're saying that you were criticized on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also saw somebody made a comment too about how do we educate the Black community against the Farrakhan and things like that against Jews. Your question, it belongs with that as well. The influences of Louis Farrakhan are not as large. Sometimes that could also be another stereotype towards the Black and brown community. And sometimes I want to reiterate that, because back in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, I just had a conversation with Josh Bell 2 days ago. We had the head of the AJC had showed us a nice, awesome PowerPoint presentation about anti-Semitism today, and how it was, she looked at us and said, Zach, Josh, as two Black men, we need you to understand there's a difference between anti-Semitism 50 years ago and anti-Semitism now. But it's, and there's ways of stopping it. And there's, social media, online ads, the culture, a lot of stereotypes and poisoning water and explaining all that, and poisoning wells and disrespect. And that form of anti-Semitism is very different than a lot of racial hate that people get for the color of their skin, but the violence is still prevalent. We wouldn't be having this conversation, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation if they didn't have a shooting at a synagogue a couple of years ago and the other horrible hate crimes that have been against Jews. But I want to say this is like that influence of the Farrakhan is really dying off, because it just looks horrible. It just doesn't mesh like it used to. You guys got to understand the power of the Black fist and things like that, the movements, the marching. A lot of that stuff gets pointed out in today's time because of social media and because of the platforms, and you can't spread hate like that. Anti-Semitism and racism co-align. So whenever you support either or, a lot of people are losing jobs. A lot of people are getting put on blast, just like what happened to Deshaun Jackson, just like what happened to Nick Cannon, just like what's happening to a lot of people. Those influences, I sometimes get scared, because I don't want the Jewish community thinking that, falling into that stereotype against my people, thinking that it's as big as it is. You get what I'm saying? I'm not trying to dull it down. I'm almost trying to reassure that those kind of influences are dying off slowly.
Our congregation in Chicago, we're an urban congregation, so we're downtown. And we've been working for the last 10 years to really create meaningful relationships with the Black community and Black churches. And now we're seeing the dividends that pays. And the reality is that in order to really change our situation, we need to have real conversations.
Absolutely.
We need to experience each other's pain and appreciate the fact that we're not the same. right? Very
Right.
different experiences. But as we saw on January 6th, right, when
Yes.
the Confederate flag was being marched to the Capitol, and black policemen were called the N-word,
Right.
and people were wearing T-shirts mocking Auschwitz,
Right.
the world itself sees us sees us together, not
Right.
apart. And I
Right.
think that's a powerful statement about where we are today.
Because we have to realize, like you said, Robert, we have to realize that those are the same people that are preaching those the hate things. They're the same ones that are burning the crosses. They're the same ones that are trying to use these intimidations. They're storming the Capitol. They're making fun of, they're mocking the Holocaust. It's sad, and it's a hateful thing. It's very, very separating. And that's what I try to say. There is nothing different between that and the Hells Angels biker gangs of the West Coast. There's nothing different between that and the influences of Farrakhan and some of the Nation of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing different between that hate, and that hate sticks out. And it's unfortunate because there's certain things that happen and certain unfortunate things that happen, and we need to change that. Do you talk about guns? You talk about gun access? There's different conversations about that. But like you said, those same people that stormed the Capitol are the same ones that are trying to push that hate, and hate comes in different forms.
There's no question. Have you been treated as a I don't know? Do people accuse you of selling out when you made that video?
Absolutely. Look at me having a panel during Black History Month, but they don't. But it's just that's what I'm saying. Like we can't contradict ourselves. Like I'm doing just as much. I'm helping my community. I'm like you said, buying backpacks, supporting the food banks, things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like just changing lives every. But we can't be selfish about that.
No, we can't.
And it's just, I think it's dumb and it's outdated, and I don't pay attention to things like that.
So you just ignore it.
You have to, because if you don't, dude, I have too big of a heart. That's what made me step up in the first place. And that's what makes me take care of my neighborhood back home and everybody, in my foundation. But when you get into this activist life, it sucks because those same people tweet at you and call you Antifa, and those same people call you far left slime. Like, just it's bullying, it's harassment, but it's the level of access I have and the platform that I have, and I have to learn how to navigate that myself.
So on the one hand, you have opened a lot of people's minds, and there have been those that have been very critical. But you've also been sort of a hero in the Jewish community, haven't you? You've got a lot of Jewish followers suddenly.
A little bit, and I think that's just I think that just has to deal with the lack of from other Black and brown celebrities, if that's what you want to call us.
Have you been invited to any Sabbath dinners?
I have, we just haven't been able to participate because of COVID.
Okay.
The party's going to be crazy, Rabbi. I'm telling you. Crazy
You
parties. When we're done out this pandemic, it's going down.
You're going to have 52 weeks a year. You're going to have another Friday night dinner to go to wherever you want to be. Well, since you posted, what have you learned about the Jewish community that you didn't know?
How I think probably the biggest thing would be the just as much the Jewish community is not where Blacks and Browns aren't as educated on the Jews. It's just the other way. Not I mean, I'm telling you guys, and you have no idea. And how I've been over to the Jewish community center over here in Pittsburgh. I've visited the rabbi virtually. I've had conversations with people. There's just that huge gap, that huge, so we need to build a bridge, because it's just, not all blacks are supporting the Farrakhan and part of the Nation of Islam and think these horrible things about Jews.
Uh-huh.
And then not all Jews are racist. Not all Jews are inclusive. Not all Jews only hold, their money and religion and all these horrible types of things. It's amazing culture and it's amazing,
Mhm.
amazing people and just as much. Do you get what I'm saying?
I totally, and I guess I want to just extend it a bit. What do you think the Jewish community needs to understand about the Black community that will begin a greater process of connectivity? And what do you think the Black community needs to know about the Jewish community to make that connectivity possible? What do you think the Jewish community needs to know about the African American community?
Mm. It's not so much about no. I think actions are better than words. It's very, very obvious to Jews how I have educated myself since in this last year of fighting anti-Semitism. It will be the same thing, but we're smart. We can tell. We can tell when you read a book or you studied or you've paid attention to something, because be a part of things, be a part of movements, go to certain community events, help and listen to Black voices talking about uplifting the inner city community. For example, Rabbi, you're working in Chicago, one of the Blackest cities in America. Dive into it, ask questions, don't have opinions, listen, hear. Now, yes, have opinions after you listen, because there are not everybody, like I said, is on the right path, and we kind of need to help each other navigate. But just like I took time to talk to the AJC for an hour and a half the other day, it's the same thing. There's plenty of opportunity online, especially in today's world, to educate yourself and to help change this world and change these cities. You know what I mean? And I would have to say that would be my best advice, because there's so many different things in different cities for different reasons of what's going on.
No question. And I guess what I would add is that in our experience, it's humility. Don't assume that you understand someone else's situation. I think you said it very well earlier. Hate comes in a lot of different forms, and racism may not look like anti-Semitism. And so for Jews, for instance, when you start to hear people quoting Hitler, or you're talking about these kinds of really horrific ideas about Jewish power, their alarm bell, red lights start going off for Jews. There are alarm bells. And Jews experience this oftentimes as an existential threat. And African Americans may not be able to relate to that in the same way that Jews may not be able to relate to the hate and the racism that Black people deal with on a daily basis. So there's a certain amount of humility that has to be involved here in order to hear without assuming. And I think that's a big part of how do we approach each other. It's with a spirit of humility and love. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and then also I read another one of the interactive questions, and it said that, it asked about rumors of Black, anti-Semitism within BLM. You got to understand, BLM isn't like a Facebook group. It's not like one club. You know what I mean? It's a movement. Sometimes it means certain things to other people. And yes, there have been people who have taken advantage of the BLM movement for personal reasons, financial reasons, and things like that, and they've been exploited. But to believe that anti-Semitism is within BLM hurts, because you're listening to it from anti-Semitic people. You know what I mean? And we have to go back to those examples of what I said. Fred Hampton, when he started the Black Panther Party, had a lot of good, wholesome political views. And because of police brutality, and because of racism, and because of hate crimes and violence against Black and brown people within the inner city, had to sometimes take militarization options back in the day. We are out of those extreme measures. We are out of those type of things. Are we out of innocent blacks and browns being killed and slaughtered by police officers and law enforcement? No.
No.
But we're out of those times of acceptance of militarization, because we actually have a voice. And we have a voice as black and brown players in the NFL. You saw that change over 2020 after the George Floyd thing across all pro sports.
What was that like for you to see players having those words "Black Lives Matter" on their helmets, right?
Super.
Fight racism. Was that meaningful for you?
Absolutely, yes, because we really mean that's what we're really talking about. Now, there's other people who have there's Black Lives BLM organizations who have been exposed for taking funds and stealing funds and doing things like that. That has nothing to do, just because it's the same letters, you know what I mean? And people want to find new letters, but the creation of Black Lives Matter is literally to identify the slaughtering of Black lives and people dying.
I think it should also be noted that in the original platform of Black Lives Matter, there was some very critical statements about Israel, but in the latest platform that has been removed. So those issues actually are no longer present in the way they once were. As long as we're talking about this, I did notice that when I was watching the Super Bowl, that none of the players knelt at the Star Spangled Banner. And I was just thinking about this season. I was thinking about it. Was that something that was discussed amongst the players?
Yeah, because sometimes it gets old. Like it pissed a lot of people off this last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
I think we found ways in the NFL to actually make change.
So that in a sense, the fact that the NFL has acknowledged Black Lives Matter in some really powerful ways, in all kinds of ways. I mean, you think about the field and helmets and all the rest and insignias. That makes a huge difference. That feels that this issue has been acknowledged in a very real way. Then.
Yes, and that's what I try to say. And you'll still see selective players kneel, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's their own way. It's just sometimes there's just a lot better things we could do. You know what I mean? But then at the time, you have to the timing of the kneel down by Kaepernick and all of the rest of us following these last couple of years, we haven't had that same platform till George Floyd, unfortunately. I mean, look at the NFL's Instagram, look at the Super Bowl, look at the support, look at the commercials at the beginning, like everything. You could tell that the NFL had transitioned into saying, hey, we need to start doing more, which is why I'm proud of, to be a part of it.
Well, it's nice to hear. I want to just get to the question that's in our feed here. What would Zach recommend to a white person who was mentoring an African-American law student on a regular basis and that got shut off by the mentee after the George Floyd murder? 2 attempts, including a handwritten letter, have been ignored by the mentee. In other words, it sounds like he got that the response to the George Floyd murder was that I don't want to have anything to do with this white person. What do you think the response should be to that? I mean, this is one case, and it's not a whole variety of cases, and it's a tough one and painful, I imagine.
You have to be able to display empathy. Sometimes that's separation. Sometimes that's distance and respecting their space. Because I know some people who are just mad. I remember the whole after the George Floyd situation, I was pissed. Trayvon Martin, I was pissed. Sometimes growing up at a younger age, I remember like saying, you know what, like, fuck white people. Like, why do, like, I don't need them. I don't, you know what I mean? But then I'd be like, no, I was quick to move on from that. I think every Black man and woman sometimes have that moment in their life when they have, and I feel the same way with Jewish people. I feel like there's some point in life where you're just like, whether you're made fun of as a kid for having a big nose or having a yarmulke on your head or doing something, or there's some anti-Semitic, like, historical thing that's been passed down through generation and culture, you're just thinking like, man, forget this. Like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
you want to separate a little bit.
right. Sometimes how we process that anger and process those things is different amongst other people. So to answer that question, sometimes space, but also by action, show a response to something local that's Black and brown that's in a positive way, to show that you're separated. And I understand that. That's exactly what we were just talking about earlier, Rabbi. Not, Jews and whites, they might be the same color, but there's a huge difference. And we need to understand that certain groups have empathy towards others and some groups need more than others.
And some patience as well, I think.
Yeah.
There's another question here from Phil Dunn. Thanks for all you've done. You're very brave and admirable. Wondering if there's a code of silence within the locker room that makes speaking out difficult, and how do you overcome that?
I'm guessing Phil's talking about like towards anti-Semitism and things like that. I would have to say just the level of relevance to players is really important. Like I'm sure if we had one of the Jewish players in our locker room, we would have had more of a support towards that. We have a really, really large Jewish population here in Pittsburgh. So that was kind of part of my big heart towards that. But at the same time, when we talk about the locker room, you got to wake up, you got to worry about your playbook, your plays, things like that. Sometimes the level of competition is what nerfs it, is what nerfs our activism. I will say that, you got to realize the locker room changes a lot when guys get cut during camp and all that stuff. But also just the level of priority and relevance, like I said, like the lack of the battle and push against anti-Semitism in the NFL is just a representation of how many Jewish players we have. Mm-hmm. That's simple.
Well, I do want to say that being in Chicago and watching the horrific events at the Tree of Life Synagogue, one of the bright moments was watching the city support the Jewish community. And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers were exemplary in this. They were there in very, very overt and very positive ways. And I know how much that was appreciated by the Jewish community, not just in Pittsburgh, but around the country, because it was, and as you all imagine, a terrifying moment to start to see people killed, in a worship space, no different than, Blacks being killed in churches. This right. Kind of moment where you say, this just can't be happening. Is this America, right? In the same way that Black policemen were saying that in the Capitol, can this really be America? What's really happening here? And this is, I think there's a moment here for Jews and Blacks to come together and really recreate the coalition of the past and go forward together. And that's at least my hope at this time. And you are, you give us a lot of hope as well as we look to the future.
Thank you, brother.
I would be remiss if, by the way, you should know that Zach Banner is a Super Bowl prognosticator. He calls the games. So in the future, if you want to know who's going to win the Super Bowl, you just need to watch his Instagram page and he'll tell you. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about B3 for a few minutes. And I want people to know about it. And I really would be very honored if people would support it as well, because it's really extraordinary. And I can't do the website justice. Right. But what I will do is I'm going to read your letter because I just was so moved by it. Welcome to B3. On April 29, 2017, my lifelong dream came true. I was officially an NFL football player. Growing up on the east side of Tacoma, getting here was all I could think about, and I can honestly say that the day I got drafted was one of the best days of my entire life. But accomplishing my dream came with an even greater sense of responsibility and an even larger platform upon which to create a legacy much bigger than football. A responsibility to give back to and invest in the communities that raised and shaped me. And so starting the B3 Foundation was one of the first things I began working on after the draft. My foundation will work to support kids both academically and athletically in the three communities most important to my life, my own development as a man. It is my mission to help kids achieve their dreams in the same way that I did, not necessarily as professional athletes, but as college-educated leaders with the world at their fingertips. In Tacoma, the city that raised me, in Los Angeles, the city that shaped me as a Trojan, a leader, and a man, and in Guam, my mom's home, the source of my heritage and the place that taught me the strength and importance of community. To everyone who supported me along my journey, thank you. And to everyone who is ready to join the B3 Foundation as we invest in the future of kids around the world, let's do this. And so, Zach, tell us a little bit more about about some of your successes with B3 and what your dreams are going forward.
So pre-COVID and stuff, we had a great mentorship program where we're trying to create mentors within those communities that you were talking about, starting back home in Tacoma, Washington, also in Los Angeles, and also on the island of Guam. And then after COVID, obviously, personal interactions. When I say building mentors, putting great adults in different job fields and different work fields, working with kids, high school kids, middle school kids, just kind of building relationships up in terms of mentor-mentee relationship, just like the law student mentor relationship that they were talking about earlier. But also at the same time, targeting education. And like we said earlier, both of my parents are educators. And so backpack drives, supporting local food banks that we understand help those kids in the neighborhood. Also this year announced that we started the interview process to give out a scholarship, a 4-year commitment for $10,000 a year to a kid who has expressed their love and passion for community service in the past and want to even dive in more in the future.
This is for college education or high school?
This is for high school kids going to college to apply for, and just a lot of different things. Go look at the website, and we work with a lot of different groups within these cities. It's awesome because we put on a panel last night with both Alicia Clark and Josh Bell and some other organizations, and how athletes of color and fighting anti-Semitism, things like that. And it's cool because as I get closer to our communities, it's not just my neighborhood is dominantly black and brown, but I take the same pictures with the local Jewish kids in my community. You know what I'm saying? Like it's crazy. And when you put how awesome it is when you put your heart out there and your arms out there to especially around the youth, you'll realize how many different cultures that you're able to help.
I can't imagine how important this is, especially this year when schools are closed, kids are trying to study at home. Have you been involved at all with upgrading computers and making sure kids have internet access? Because that's a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at that with the device thing. The issue that we have is, especially with the timing of the vaccinations and things like that, and both of my parents are educators. My dad's a superintendent right now, and my mother's she's a middle school principal. And the communication to the districts and things like that is hopefully by this mid-year, we'll start getting kids back. And once the vaccine starts going out and gets out stronger. So we don't really want to dump the money into devices. We understand there's going to be, you know what I'm saying? Like that's when we find that at first we were taking that approach, and then we had some of the issues of getting it around the district and certain things like that. But then we just decided that, at first this last year I donated to my neighborhood middle school and elementary school a bunch of masks and cleaning, hand sanitizer, and with the backpacks and full school supplies. So kind of just maneuvering around COVID. not expecting it to be forever, hopefully.
I can, and the backpacks that you give out, they have all kinds of school supplies in them, so the kids can kind of compete.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just, I mean, Rabbi, you got to talk about kids who have one pair of shoes every couple of years. You know what I mean? We're talking about backpacks with paper, pens, pencils, glue sticks. I forget the name of our partner. World Vision is one of them, but the others, the backpack supply, the actual supplier of the school supplies, they do such a fantastic job for like $6 or $7 a backpack. So this year, I think this last year we were able to do, I think, 25 to 5,000 backpacks. I think we want to up that to 10. We're changing lives, man. We're able to give people things that they actually need, especially kids.
I'm trying to imagine what it would mean to know that someone like you, who, as we've noted earlier, sort of made it to the top, cares about the kids in your community.
Yeah.
You haven't left them behind. I'm sure that just means everything to them.
It does, and that's the only reason why I do it. It's not about, getting rewards or getting awards for doing certain things for the community. It's not. I really could care less about that, or even the spotlight. It's doing things like this where we're able to change people's lives and have great discussions, and also give materialistic objects or actual things that are just, that will actually, I don't want to say materialistic, but you know what I mean, like actual material objects like backpacks, food, and things like that.
Right.
It's something that just.
Do you have any kids? Do you have any kids who are going to college now that are on scholarship?
No, the scholarship is brand new. So the kids that
we're going
this
there.
year.
So yes. You're hoping that maybe next year you'll have some kids that are going to be able to.
Yes, I think we're trying to get a kid going into college this fall.
That'll be amazing. One of the things that we're doing, and you might want, and I'm happy to partner with you on this, is we run a program called U Tutoring. Mm-hmm. And so we have kids that are in junior high school and high school. They're using their smartphones, and we work with the teachers and with parents and with the Bright Star Church, which is a church that we work with. And so kids are meeting with kids from Bright Star Church once a week, twice a week. Let's say 8th graders are meeting with 3rd graders, and there are 4th graders, and they're tutoring for an hour by using their smartphone.
Awesome.
And that creates a real connection, because it's not just about the tutoring, but part of the program is that kids need to get together once a month. Mm-hmm. For sometimes at Bright Star Church on the south side, sometimes at Anshe, which is on the north side. And that's the kind of connectivity that I think makes a difference. And, that's where the Jewish community and the African-American community kind of learn. That's how we get to know each other.
Absolutely.
There's a guy on the call, his name's Bob Weissman. And when we first started this program, he actually helped us get it off the ground. I just want to shout out to him, but it's a good story. I said, look, our kids, they all have their smartphones. But at Bright Star Church, a lot of kids didn't have computers. And Bob called one day and he said, a law firm that I know of is going, they're changing over all their computers. And he showed up with cartons of laptops. And that got us off the ground. And I know, Zach, I know this for a fact, that the Jewish community is looking for ways to connect. Mm-hmm. And they're looking for ways to make a difference. And if we can support your program, not only financially, but also by expanding it to sort of do tutoring and to be helpful, we want to do it.
Would love to have that conversation with you guys.
All right. Well, we'll pick that up one day. Do you have anything that you want to share with us before we stop? I want to, because I just think this is such an important conversation. But what do you think it's going to do? Are you hopeful about the future?
Absolutely. I think there's sometimes a disconnect between older generations who have seen racism and hate crimes and so much over their lives from both the Black and brown side and the Jewish community, where sometimes it just doesn't seem like there might be any change. But those people, I feel like, are, especially with just how our world's moving and identifying things on social media, identifying hate via internet. There's just too many cameras everywhere. There's too many different things everywhere to identify both the ones that are doing great, amazing things like we are in this panel, but also to identify those who are hateful and have horrible parts in their hearts, and towards Blacks and browns, towards Jews, towards women in the workplace. There's just so many different areas in our world that show hate, and it's starting to be identified and pointed out more and more as we progress. So I feel optimistic, but at the same time, I understand that we're not there yet. So I'm going to keep fighting the good fight.
You are. I have to tell you, I have a photograph in my office of March and Selma, and from '63, and there's Dr. King, and there's a priest, and there's Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and they're all marching together.
Right.
But the thing to keep in mind about that is that the predominant color of the marchers were Black and brown. There were whites. There were whites. There were whites that marched, but that was a pretty small percentage.
Right.
And there were still marching, obviously. But one thing that gives me hope is when I look at the thousands of people who turned out to march across the country, right, in the wake of these terrible shootings and murders.
Right.
You saw a rainbow. You saw the whole spectrum of America standing up and marching. And that gives me a lot of hope. And I think that's something to keep in mind too.
I think just be like using us as an example right now, doing this. There's a lot of people like us right now who are very different visually, but same in the chest.
I'm with you. I got to say, I'm just looking at the comments about just how grateful people are and for what you've said and what you've done and the leadership role that you've taken. And if you're in Chicago, there are a lot of Shabbos dinners waiting for you.
Right, to Rabbi, I told you we were going to turn up, man. It's going to be an amazing time.
And you can start at our home. We'd love to have you.
Thank you.
Listen, we wish you well. I imagine you're looking forward to the Browns Steelers rematch next year, right?
1,000%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us, and good luck with your work. And we'll be in touch with ways that we can be some more supportive.
God bless, Rabbi. Talk soon.
Thank you. Be well. Thanks a lot, Zach. And thank everyone for turning out tonight for a very special evening with a very special man, Zach Banner.